The gun smoke hit him first, sharp, bitter, riding the canyon wind like a warning. Calder Boone tightened his knees against Copper's flanks, the sorrel's ears flicking toward the sound. Beneath the sloping lip of Dry Hollow Pass, the echoes sharpened into what they were: rifle fire, rapid and reckless. Then came the sight: a buckboard wagon tearing down the arroyo, wheels shrieking over ruts, a black-haired woman at the reins, shawl ripped half free, eyes fixed ahead like a horse sensing floodwater. 3 riders closed in behind her, bandanas masking their faces. 2 more burst from a cedar brake to cut her off, their coats snapping in the wind, carbines leveled. Calder saw the way one leaned forward, not aiming for the mules, aiming for her. Copper didn't wait for the spur. He dropped into a downhill charge, iron shoes throwing sparks off hidden rock. Calder's Winchester was out before the first bandit even turned his head. The crack tore across the pass. The lead rider's stirrup split, boot yanked clean, and the man pitched sideways into the dust. The woman's head snapped toward the sound, hair catching in the last thread of sunlight before the canyon swallowed it. Another rider swung his rifle toward Calder, but Copper's shoulder hit him first, sending man and gun into the sage. The third spun away, cursing, and thundered up a side ravine. The buckboard lurched to a halt only when the mules, trembling and foam-flecked, refused another step. Calder was there in 3 strides, dropping from Copper and catching the woman's arm before she could fall. Her breath came in sharp bursts, not from panic, from fury. "You hurt?" he asked, scanning her for blood. "Not mine," she said, voice low, steady. She yanked the shotgun from the wagon seat, chamber open, empty. "They didn't give me time." Calder glanced at the rear sacks. Flour and beans split open from stray rounds. He saw it then, the way her gaze kept darting past him into the canyon shadows, as if the gunfire had only been the first chapter. He offered his canteen. She took it, but didn't drink. "They weren't after the wagon," she said finally. Her eyes met his, dark and unflinching. "They were after me." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of the bandits' horses, still somewhere close. Calder slid the Winchester back into its scabbard, though his hand never left the grip. "Then we'd best get you off this road," he said. She hesitated, as if weighing something unseen, then nodded. "Josette Lane." "Calder Boone," he replied, swinging up into Copper's saddle. "Let's move." The mules found their feet, hooves clattering over the rock as the buckboard fell in behind him. They wound north through a shallow wash, the light dimming to the copper gray that always came before the first stars. Calder kept scanning the ridges, but it was the silence that needled him most, the kind that said danger wasn't gone, only waiting. Half an hour later, with the pass behind them and the sky deepening to cobalt, they reached the first rise of Boone Land. From here, the open grass rolled clear to the northern fence line, but the barn and cabin sat in the hollow beyond, a good place to hide or to be cornered. Josette pulled the mules alongside Copper. Her voice was quieter now, but no less certain. "They'll come again," she said, "and next time, it won't be just 3. Calder studied her face, the set jaw, the flicker of something that wasn't fear. It was the look of someone who'd been hunted before. The wind shifted again. Somewhere far back in the pass, a horse whinnied, the sound cutting through the dusk like a knife through canvas. Calder didn't look at her when he said it. "Then we'll be ready." The lamps were already lit when they reached the Boone cabin. Calder swung down, tied Copper, and helped Josette from the buckboard. She stepped onto the porch with the wariness of someone measuring every door and window for escape. Inside, the cabin smelled of mesquite smoke and strong coffee. Calder set a pot on the stove while she drifted toward the mantel, her fingers brushing the smooth wood as if reading the history of the room by touch. "You live alone?" she asked, not looking at him. "Always have," he said. "Till now." A pause stretched between them, broken only by the hiss of the coffee. Calder poured 2 tin cups, slid one across the table. She sat, the lamplight catching the dust still clinging to her shawl. "You going to tell me," he asked, "why those men wanted you bad enough to chase you through a canyon?" Josette's gaze fixed on the steam curling off her cup. "They were hired," she said at last. "I don't know by who, but I can guess." "Guess?" "My brothers," she said, voice flat. Ephraim and Silas Lane. Haven't seen them in 5 years, but trouble never had to travel far to find me. Calder leaned back in his chair. What kind of trouble? They work muscle for freight bosses and card sharks down in Yarrow. Last winter, word reached me they'd put themselves in debt to the kind of men who don't send bills. Only bullets. They think I've got money, or something worth money. Her hand went to her shawl, tugging it tighter. Calder noticed the way her fingers brushed the edge of something hidden beneath. Not jewelry, too flat for that. Papers, maybe. You carrying it now? Her eyes met his, hard and unreadable. I'm carrying my own business, Mr. Boone. Before he could press further, a sharp thump rattled the window shutters. Copper snorted outside. Calder was on his feet in an instant, Winchester in hand. He crossed to the door and eased it open. The night lay quiet, too quiet. The moon was just rising over the ridge, throwing long shadows across the yard. Then came the sound, a single horse pacing slow at the far fence. Calder stepped onto the porch, rifle low, eyes narrowing. Nothing moved. The horse's shadow slipped away, swallowed by the dark. He shut the door, locked it. Josette hadn't moved from her chair, but her knuckles were white around the coffee cup. That wasn't them, she said. How do you know? They don't ride alone. The clock on the shelf ticked, loud as hammer strikes. Calder stoked the stove, then sat again. If they're coming, they'll come at night. Less eyes, more cover. Josette nodded as if confirming what she'd already known. They'll knock first. They'll want you to think you have a choice. A gust rattled the shutters again, this time from the opposite wall. Calder rose, moved to the window. The yard was empty, the barn hulking like a crouched animal in the moonlight. You've been through this before, he said. Her answer was barely a whisper. I've been on both sides of the door. The words hung there, heavier than the silence that followed. Calder felt the shape of the night changing, tightening, like a rope pulled taut. He poured another round of coffee, though neither of them drank. They waited. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of horse sweat and leather. Josette's eyes flicked to the door, then to him. They'll be here before the fire dies. Calder set his rifle across his knees, the lamplight gleaming on the steel. He didn't smile, but his voice was steady when he spoke. Then let's see if your brothers know how to knock polite. The knock came just past midnight. 3 slow raps, the kind meant to be heard, not mistaken for wind. Calder Boone set his coffee down without a sound. The fire in the stove had sunk to embers, painting the walls in a low copper glow. Beside him, Josette Lane sat motionless in the rocking chair, her shawl drawn close. Her eyes didn't leave the door. That's them, she said, voice flat as iron. Outside, boots crunched on frost-hardened dirt. Calder rose, Winchester in hand, and crossed the room. The knock came again, a little louder. Mr. Boone, a voice called, deep and measured. Open up. We've come a long way for our sister. Calder cracked the door but didn't step aside. The moonlight caught 2 figures standing on the porch. Broad-shouldered men with the same dark eyes as Josette. Ephraim Lane stood front, coat open enough to show the butt of a Colt on his hip. Behind him, Silas Lane leaned against a porch post, his Winchester held with the lazy confidence of a man who'd spent a lifetime with his finger near a trigger. She's fine where she is, Calder said. Ephraim's smile didn't reach his eyes. We'll see about that. He stepped forward. But Calder didn't move. Josette's voice came from behind Calder, steady and clear. What do you want, Ephraim? Ephraim glanced over Calder's shoulder. Come on now, Joe. We just want you home. Ain't safe out here with strangers. Strangers don't send men with guns to run me off the road, she replied. A flicker passed over Silas's face. Not guilt, but recognition. That wasn't us, he said, but I'll bet we know who paid him. That's why we're here. Calder stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him just enough to shield Josette. The cold bit through his shirt, but the space between him and the brothers was colder still. Whatever history you got with her, Calder said, it ends here. She stays if she wants to stay. Ephraim tilted his head, studying Calder like a rancher weighs a fence post before deciding if it's worth the work. You figure you can stand between blood? If blood's got a mind to spill itself, yeah, Calder said. The wind stirred, rattling the barn's loose siding. Far off, a coyote yipped once, then fell silent. Silas's gaze slid to the yard beyond, scanning shadows. Calder caught it, that quick, restless check. They weren't alone. "Who else is out there?" Calder asked. Ephraim didn't answer. Instead, he said, "We'll take her now, and there won't be trouble, or we'll take her later, and there'll be nothing left of this place but ash." Calder's grip tightened on the Winchester. "You planning to light the match yourself?" Ephraim smiled again, but the sound that came next didn't belong to him. From somewhere past the barn, a glass bottle shattered. The smell of kerosene rode the air. All three men turned toward the sound. A shadow peeled away from the far fence line. Then another, and another. Rifles glinted in the moonlight. Calder swore under his breath. Rafe Coulter. The same one-eyed bastard he'd knocked off his horse in the canyon, and he hadn't come alone. "Looks like you brought friends," Calder said to Ephraim. The brothers traded a look that said they hadn't. Silas muttered, "Hell." Rafe's voice carried across the yard, slick and cruel. "Evening, gents, and Miss Lane, if you can hear me in there. I've come to collect what's owed. In coin or company, makes no difference to me." 5 men fanned out behind him, each carrying a rifle or shotgun. The moonlight caught the scar across Rafe's missing eye, the empty socket black as a mine shaft. Ephraim cursed low. "We've been tailed." "Seems like," Calder said. The porch became the only piece of neutral ground between two lines ready to break. Rafe's men stopped short of the porch steps, weapons loose but ready. "Here's the offer," Rafe said. "Hand her over, and you can go back to squabbling over family matters. Or keep her, and you'll both be 6 feet under before the rooster crows." Ephraim bristled. "You're not taking our sister anywhere." "Our?" Calder asked. Ephraim didn't flinch. "I said she's not going." For a moment, it was almost comical. Calder, Boone, and the Lane brothers, standing shoulder to shoulder, staring down the same enemy. But the humor died quick under the weight of the standoff. "Guess we agree on one thing," Calder said. "Guess we do," Ephraim replied. The barn door creaked open behind Rafe's men. The mules in the buckboard snorted, restless. The smell of kerosene thickened. One spark and the whole place would go up like dry tinder. Calder shifted the Winchester in his hands. "We end this fast before somebody gets the bright idea to light that barn." Rafe grinned, teeth catching the moonlight. "Fast works for me." Somewhere behind Calder, the door opened. Josette stepped onto the porch, the scattergun from the buckboard in her hands. Her voice cut through the cold like a whip crack. "You boys want to fight over me, fine. But you'll do it in the dark." She lifted the scattergun skyward and fired. The blast punched a hole in the lantern hanging from the barn's corner, glass exploding, oil spilling into the dirt. Darkness slammed over the yard, leaving only the pale wash of the moon. In that breathless moment, the lines blurred. Family and stranger, outlaw and rancher, all shadows now, each man guessing where the other stood. And the night, colder than before, was just getting started. The darkness swallowed the yard whole. One heartbeat there was lantern light, the next it was gone, replaced by moon haze and the flicker of a barn fire, just starting to breathe. For a moment nobody moved. You could hear the wind over the ridge and the barn's old timbers popping as heat found them. Then the spell broke. A muzzle flash tore the night. The shot went wide, splintering a porch post inches from Calder Boone's shoulder. He dropped low, Winchester up, eyes raking the shifting silhouettes. "Rafe!" Ephraim Lane's voice ripped through the chaos. "You bring fire to my sister's feet. I'll plant you where the buzzards don't bother." "Try it, Lane," came the answer, followed by 2 quick reports from a revolver. The yard became a scatter of movement, men diving for cover, boots slamming against frozen dirt, the sound of breath close and ragged in the cold air. Calder edged down the porch steps, keeping the barn between him and the shooters on the fence line. Josette crouched near the door, scattergun reloaded, eyes tracking every shadow. The barn fire licked higher, painting the nearest faces in violent orange. Calder spotted one of Rafe's men silhouetted against the flames, leveling a rifle at Ephraim. Calder didn't think. He fired. The man spun sideways, dropped into the dirt. Another figure burst from behind the water trough. Silas Lane, charging toward the barn. He smashed open the side door and began dragging buckets from the rain barrel. "If this barn goes," he shouted, "it takes the house with it." Rafe must have heard because he barked an order. "Hold the barn! Keep them off the flames!" Two of his men shifted, angling toward Silas. Calder ran for the cover of the hay shed, dropped to one knee and put the first down with a shot to the shoulder. The second dove for the dark. "Boone!" Ephraim's voice again, closer now. Calder turned to see the eldest Lane pressed against the porch rail, his revolver barking toward the fence. "We push them or we burn!" It wasn't an alliance Calder had asked for, but the alternative was losing the ranch and Josette to fire and bullets alike. "On your right," Calder shouted. Ephraim pivoted just in time to catch a charging bandit with the heel of his Colt, sending the man tumbling down the steps. The barn roof groaned, heat eating into the rafters. Josette dashed from the porch to the waterline, skirts tangling around her boots, and seized a bucket from Silas. She moved like someone who'd fought fire before, fast, steady, eyes locked on the flames. Calder dropped another attacker, then sprinted to join her. Together they heaved water onto the blaze, steam hissing up into their faces. The fire flinched, but it wasn't dead yet. Behind them, the fight shifted. Rafe himself came forward, a long knife in hand, using the smoke as cover. He lunged at Ephraim, the two men colliding hard, weapons clattering away. They grappled in the dirt, grunting, the knife flashing once, twice. Calder saw it out of the corner of his eye, but couldn't leave Josette at the barn alone. She hurled the last bucket against the hottest point, coughing through the steam. Then came the shout. Silas, voice sharp. "Boone, behind you!" Calder spun. One of Rafe's men was charging from the shadows, club raised. Calder braced, swung the Winchester stock like a bat, and dropped him cold. The barn fire shrank under their assault, flames clawing but failing to reach the hayloft. Josette staggered back, chest heaving, face smeared with soot. By the time Calder turned again, Ephraim had Rafe pinned against the frozen ground, the knife kicked clear. For a moment, Calder thought Ephraim would finish him. Instead, the eldest Lane leaned close and growled something low. Whatever it was drained the fight from Rafe's eyes. Ephraim shoved him aside. "Get your dogs and get out before I change my mind," he said. Rafe spat blood, glared at Calder, then motioned to his remaining men. They melted into the shadows, the sound of hoofbeats fading toward the pass. The yard fell silent except for the hiss of dying flames and the sharp breaths of those still standing. Calder lowered the Winchester. Silas dumped one last bucket on the barn, steam rolling off the charred boards. Josette stood between the three men, her gaze moving from brother to brother, then to Calder. The firelight caught her eyes, and for the first time since the canyon, they weren't guarded. But the quiet didn't last. Ephraim wiped a hand across his mouth, turned to Calder, and said, "We're not done. She still comes with us." The cold between them came back sharper than before, and this time, there was no third enemy to distract from the choice that had to be made. The barn steamed in the cold, its blackened boards hissing like a kettle cooling down. The yard still smelled of smoke and gunpowder. Calder Boone stood with the Winchester resting in the crook of his arm, eyes locked on Ephraim Lane. "She's not leaving," Calder said. His voice was steady, but the muscles in his jaw were drawn tight. Ephraim took a slow step forward, his boots grinding ash into the dirt. "You think you can keep her, Boone? She's blood. She rides with us." Before Calder could answer, Josette stepped between them. Her shawl was gone, her hair tangled with soot, and the scattergun hung loosely in her hands. Not in threat, but in finality. "I'm not property," she said. Her voice carried more than volume. It carried the kind of weight men didn't argue with. "Not yours, not his. I decide where I go." Silas shifted, eyes darting between them. He muttered, "Josie!" "No," she cut in. "If you take me now, you take me as a hostage, not a sister. And you know Ma wouldn't forgive you for that." Ephraim's jaw worked. The wind caught the corner of his coat, flapping it like a signal flag. Finally, he exhaled slow, spit into the dirt, and holstered his Colt. "Fine. You made your choice." He glanced at Calder, eyes still hard. "If you hurt her, Boone, I'll come back for more than talk." Calder didn't blink. "If I hurt her, I'll be waiting." The brothers turned, collected their horses. In a minute, they were just shadows slipping into the tree line, their hoofbeats fading into the night until even that was gone. The sudden stillness was louder than the gunfire had been. Silas dumped the last bucket on a stubborn ember, then followed after Ephraim without a word. Josette lowered the scattergun, letting it rest against the porch rail. Calder walked past her toward the barn, checked the damage. The structure would hold, but the siding would need replacing before winter. "You could have let them take you," he said finally, still looking at the barn. "I could have," she said, "but then I'd still be running." He turned then, caught her watching him with an expression he hadn't seen before. Something unguarded, steady. "Guess you're staying then," he said. "Guess I am." Weeks later, spring came quick to Boone Land. The scars on the barn were patched with fresh cedar, the smell of cut wood mixing with the first green shoots on the hills. The buckboard sat under a lean-to, mules resting fat and content. On the porch, a new sign hung over the rail, Boone and Lane Ranch. Calder had carved it himself, the letters deep and straight. Josette stepped out, wiping flour from her hands, and stood beside him. They watched a pair of colts chase each other along the fence line, their manes bright in the afternoon sun. "Storm's coming," Calder said, glancing at the western horizon where dark clouds stacked like distant mountains. She smiled faintly, a hint of the woman who'd ridden through Dry Hollow Pass under gunfire. "We've weathered worse." He looked at her then, and for the first time since that canyon night, the tightness in his chest eased. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and something else. The promise of ground that could hold more than just roots. Some folks say the West was built on grit, others on gunpowder. But nights like this prove it was built on choice. The choice to stand your ground, to protect what's worth keeping, and to let a person be more than what the world tried to make them. Calder Boone didn't just save Josette Lane from a canyon ambush. Together, they saved each other from a life of running. And in a land where storms always roll in sooner or later, maybe that's the only kind of peace you can count on. If this story pulled you into the saddle and kept you riding till the last word, go ahead and give it a like. Drop a comment down below. Tell me your favorite moment or what you think happened the next time trouble came knocking at Boone and Lane Ranch. And if you're hungry for more tales from the Old West, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next ride. Out here, the story's never really over. It's just waiting for the next sunrise.